welcome back to another episode of the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, shoveling snow, putting ice melt down, who knows what time of year it is, maybe you're pulling weed, I don't know, wherever you're at, but whatever you're at, wherever you're at, whatever you are doing, however you're doing it, thank you for tuning in and being with me today. I'm your host, Jay, and today we have some very special guests, plural, one of them returning to the show, first one on the show for the first time. I have Janice Down, a licensed social worker, and then as well as her daughter, Katie, as well, joining me today. A little bit about Janice. You may recognize the name, like, Janice Johnson Down? I've heard that name before. Yes, you have, because she is back on the show again. She's a licensed master social worker, a recovering alcoholic, and a mother of 4. And Katie is one of her amazing children. With over 20 years of experience in the mental health and addiction field, she has dedicated her life to helping others navigate the complexities of recovery and rebuilding relationships. In our last conversation, episode 92, that was a long time ago if you've been keeping up with the feed of the podcast and the podcast rolls. Episode 92 feels like ages ago. Janice shared her personal story of growing up in a family affected by addiction. We delved into how distractions often serve as coping mechanisms and discussed the genetic predisposition to addiction. Janice emphasized the importance of transparency, accountability, and consistency in parenting, especially when repairing strained relationships. She's also opened up about her unresolved relationship with her biological mother, highlighting the challenges and potential peace that comes with forgiveness and reconciliation. And so some of the takeaways from the episode were, and that was such a good episode, acknowledging and addressing genetic predisposition to addiction is essential. Transparency and consistency are vital in repairing relationships. Forgiveness can bring peace, but isn't always appropriate or possible. Today we're going to continue our conversation. We're going to dive into some different topics as well, like family healing, why mental health treatment is important, and addressing the cycle of generational traumas. And we also, again, have a special guest appearance from Katie, one of Janice's 4 children that I mentioned earlier. Janice is also the author of the upcoming book, Rebuilding Relationships and Recovery, set to release in March 2025. The book is a comprehensive guide for anyone struggling to regain the love, respect, and trust of family and friends after battling addiction or mental illness. So, without further ado, let me welcome Janice and Katie to the show. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for having us. I'm very excited to be back here, and that introduction was so flattering.
Oh. Yes, thank you so much, Jay.
So I'm super excited to have you guys. Super excited to have you again, Janice, and talk about this important topic. As you know, as our listeners probably know by now, if they listen for any amount of time, that this recovery and addiction is something that has affected me directly. As an adult now, my biological mother has and is still an addict, and I don't know if she's in recovery or is relapsed or gone back to recovery, kind of where she's at in her journey. I really don't know because I haven't talked to her in 13 years, so I haven't talked to her for almost more than half my life at this point, which is kind of crazy to put into context there, but regardless, so it's something that's affected me directly growing up, and so it's a very near and dear topic to my heart, something I care a lot about, recovery and addiction, and talking about it and having that conversation, because it can be a rather uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people to have, especially about their parents. So it's one that I'm happy to have again, and something I feel is very important. So with that, I like to kick things off with kind of a big question, kind of start us out hot and stay hot after that. What is a hill you're willing to die on when it comes to either recovery or rebuilding relationships?
A hill that I'm willing to die on?
Yeah.
Like something I'm willing to sacrifice?
Something that you're not willing to sacrifice, like a standpoint or a point of view or an opinion, or something that you're so grounded in that no matter what, it couldn't get you off the hill, couldn't get you off the ledge. Maybe not the ledge. That's a bad analogy. But like you wouldn't give it up for really anything.
Okay, so much easier than I thought it was going to be. So my sobriety. I mean, I'm 11 pushing 12 years sober, and it's much more than the cliche, like if I don't take care of my sobriety, I can't take care of anything else, because that's true. If I don't do what it takes to stay sober, to work on my mental health, everything else is going to fall apart. I mean, if I went back to drinking, I think I would lose the most important things that I've gained, which is my family back. But yeah. So my sobriety. I'm trying not to ramble. Yeah, my sobriety is probably the most important thing. And some people take offense to that when I go that's at the top of my list. They'll be like, oh, your family should come first or God should come first. Well, all of that's tied into my sobriety. Those are all tools that help contribute, so it's not like I'm neglecting them, but I just keep that in the forefront of my mind.
Yeah. I think early in sobriety, it can seem selfish to be so focused on sobriety, but at the end of the day, that is the most important thing.
So Katie supports me in that, I think. My family, we've had enough time together. They get it. They don't see that they're second, that they're in second place.
Gotcha. Yeah. Would you say that the sobriety element here is probably the most important, or one of the most important parts in rebuilding relationship, in rebuilding the relationship that you guys have, or Janice, that you have with your other children and the rest of your family?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of people ask me, like, people who have relapsed or gone back out, should I share that I've relapsed? Okay, but anyhow, sobriety is key to my relationships with them too. I say this in my book. I say this everywhere. I can't build trust with my loved ones, much less my coworkers, my boss, unless I am sober. I mean, it's like the foundation of my relationship with them, which then, let me go back to my original point. I believe firmly, because relapse is very prevalent in early recovery. Some would say it's a part of getting to sobriety in general and finally getting there. It's not the worst thing that can happen. But so I always say, tell your families, better to be honest. Like you mentioned earlier, transparency. If you had a relapse, go ahead and share it with your kids. I think that in the long run will build confidence in the relationship as you accrue time in sobriety.
Yeah. Some time and consistency, and being consistent over time also has helped. And your mom, like, something you've done is you continue to learn and you continue to grow and you continue to do more research, and that compounds and builds over time. And that's definitely shown and helped rebuild our relationship for sure.
Yeah.
And us growing, I mean, we've done a lot of learning too in this process. Like, I had no education on addiction before this had all happened. And yeah, we've all learned a lot, but you've definitely put in a lot of work into our relationship and your sobriety.
Yeah, that makes me so happy to hear that they acknowledge that, because for many of us in early sobriety, it's very frustrating. A lot of us expect, addicts in general, part of our addiction is that we want when we want it. We have a very short attention span and we expect results immediately. And I think this is a really important point for anyone early in recovery from mental illness or addiction, that it takes time for our family members to catch up to us, to understand and to believe us. So that a lot of times you hear, and I hear this more with young people, not to discriminate, but that they go, well, they don't get why their parents don't trust them yet. They'll be like, I'm really serious this time. I really mean it. I've got 7 days of sobriety. Why doesn't my family trust me yet? And I'm like, because 7 days is not enough for them. They need more time. I mean, it takes substantial, and each family member is going to be a little bit different. And in my experience, I had family members who opened the door to me a little quicker than others.
And I also think it takes time for an addict's brain to heal as well. So, like, there are certain behaviors that early in sobriety are still representative of an addict. And that can be really difficult as well, because you think that, like, as a family member, when someone stops drinking, that there should be a switch that just flips and they should go back to being their old self. but the brain needs time to heal and the body needs time to heal. And I mean, I think it took almost a year for like really to show signs of improvement in our relationship. But
Absolutely.
some of that was because of my frustration and like different mindsets and like your brain still needing time to heal and rebound from everything.
Yeah.
Now,
There's a real. Go ahead, Jay.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, was there any fear in this initial, like that first year of, repairing these relationships and, essentially getting to know each other again, rebuilding that trust? And
I love
what
this question.
was there some fear involved here on both
Absolutely.
sides?
I love this question. And I'm going to jump on it first, Katie. Without telling my life story, I have one of my core issues is a fear of abandonment. And I, came from my own growing up experience. And my reaction in early recovery, I'm also very fear-based. But so one of the things that I typically do in order is to avoid fear. So I avoided, because of my fear, my anxiety, I put off procrastinating on trying to rebuild those relationships. Part of that was based on the idea that all I have to do is get sober and that should be enough. But more of it was really based on my fear that they might reject me. I do not want, and being rejected by the people who you invest your most love in can be the most painful. And this is a mistake I made. I just avoided and made assumptions. So I don't know if Katie had any fears.
Oh, for sure. I had many fears of you relapsing. I had many fears of like, if I let my walls back down and let you back in, like, will I be hurt again? In your addiction and even like early sobriety, I really built up walls to protect myself moving forward, and like found strength in myself and my brothers, and to then be vulnerable again is a difficult thing. So yeah, I was very fearful at the beginning. Now, fortunately, I feel very confident and I love you so much. I've loved you all along, but I'm just so proud of you, and I'm very confident in your sobriety all these years later.
So Katie, I'm curious, how old were you during this, like, the beginning of your mom's sobriety?
So my mom went to rehab my sophomore year of college.
Okay.
It was still like my senior year of college, we still didn't have the best relationship. My mom came to visit me and like we would go out for lunch. At the time, my mom was driving a lot to Texas too to take care of her parents. And so like she would come pass through my college town, but it was really just that. It's not, our relationship wasn't then what it is now.
I would say it was a very superficial relationship.
Yeah, for sure.
I walked on eggshells. I don't know, Katie, if you walked on eggshells around me, but I was kind of testing the water at first. And still, like Katie said, there was still kind of that alcoholic fog and old behavior patterns. Like one of my old behavior patterns is to sit in self-pity or play the victim. And I remember doing that once with Katie, and Katie immediately picked up on that and called me out on it, which was a great lesson for both of us. But yeah, so initially, as those lessons occurred, I had to learn from them. The fog had to clear off of my brain. I had to learn new coping skills and new ways to communicate too with Katie, with all my kids. So
now, was it like a different way of communication for each child? Because I would assume that each of the four each have their own kind of different timeline. And so I guess, Janice, from your perspective, you had to kind of relearn how to communicate with each of them. But Katie, I'm just kind of curious here. What were those conversations like between you and your siblings? Of like talking not about your mom, but basically talking about your mom and her sobriety and her recovery, and the initial, that knee jerk, mom's going to rehab, and that first year or two, like, what were those conversations like amongst you four?
Yeah. So my brothers, I want to start by saying they are each like, they each have hearts of gold and are like angels on earth. Like
Okay, are you the youngest, or where do you fall in the four?
I'm the second. So my
Second.
older
Okay.
brother was in Atlanta, already in Atlanta at the time, where he now has a wife and two little babies. And then my younger brothers at the time were in high school and middle school, and each of them are very different from one another and have different communication styles as well. So like my youngest brother, he didn't want to talk at all about what was happening. But in this process, it really brought us all much closer together. And I leaned a lot on them, and just in terms of like not actually like necessarily communicating with them about what was happening always, but just spending more time with them at home. Like I kept driving home from school on weekends to go to my youngest brother's lacrosse tournaments and travel with them. And that was really fun. But spending a lot of time with them, whether we were talking about what was happening or not, kept me sane during this process, honestly. But my older brother, I don't know. Sorry.
In a way, her older brother's a little bit out of the loop.
I don't want to say
Katie...
he feels bad about that though. So that's why I was like, maybe I should backtrack here and not bring this up.
Did he more or less like kind of distance himself because he was already kind of...
No, it was just that like, so he had already graduated from college during this time. He had really he established a life in Atlanta and was not at home as much during my mom's active addiction. And so he wasn't as aware of how bad it had gotten and what was going on necessarily at home. And
can I jump in, Katie?
Yes.
So I like to think, and I don't know if it's entirely true, but I didn't start drinking until after I was done having babies. So Katie and Dennis had kind of a different childhood, birth to age 10 or 12 experience than our brothers. And then and my drinking accelerated. It's hard for me to honestly say where I went from drinking hard to alcoholic drinking. But in my mind, and Katie, you can correct me, that the worst of my drinking and my behaviors was like the last 3 years, of which most of the time Dennis was off at college.
Yeah.
So he didn't see as much of it. It wasn't that he didn't care. He just wasn't as much of a witness to it. And Katie, okay, and this is a very sexist thing to say, sorry, but I think Katie, being a female, and I think it is her natural instinct to be more maternal, that she kind of, as I was slipping out of my role of parenting, she was slipping role in as mother, and took on some of those responsibilities. So Dennis was sheltered a little bit from the worst of it. And
which is okay.
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. It's just, it goes back to what you were asking, Jay. Each child had a very different experience.
Yeah. Like Katie's experience, if you mentioned it was the last like 3 years, that's like Katie's last couple of years of high school, and transitioning into adulthood and whatnot. And so I don't think it's sexist at all that Katie at that age is more so seeing like, okay, there's a need here at home. I need to fill in, some of this responsibilities. Like these two kids, they still got to get fed, they still got to get bathed, they still got to do these things. And, in Katie's like, 16, 17-year-old brain, it makes sense.
I still think my mom gives me more credit in this part of our history, because I really do think that, like, I don't remember it that way. I remember it as wanting to come home to spend time with my younger brothers, not necessarily to take care of them, but just to like re-nourish my soul. And like at the time I didn't relate, like I didn't feel like a lot of my friends at college fully understood what was happening or had relatable experiences, although it's much more common than at the time I thought. But so coming home felt comforting because Matthew and Michael had been experiencing the same thing. So, and my brother Matthew, my middle brother, him and I have always been really, really close and had a really close relationship. So he's probably the one I spoke to the most about what was happening. Like we would take car rides places and have heart-to-hearts about what was going on. So that was really helpful in the experience.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I would say, and I think Matthew would agree, that he was the child who opened the door quickest to me, and that I made the first good steps with. And and I don't know if that's his nature. I don't know. I talk about it a lot. He wrote an impact letter to me in treatment, which was excruciatingly painful, but very helpful. And perhaps that triggered a little more compassion for me. I'm thinking this out loud right now. I'm like having an aha moment. Perhaps that made me see his point of view a little bit better and to see how I was hurting him and I had hurt him. So yeah, each of the kids reacted differently. It took, and I have the permission of my kids to share most of everything about them. So I feel comfortable saying, like, my youngest child, it took well over 4 years. He was in 8th grade when I went to treatment, and we have a great relationship now, but it took at least 4 years before I could say anything where I go, oh my God, that's progress. I still, oh my gosh, Katie probably could say, I still walk on eggshells a little bit around him because I feel guilty. But 2, I'm still learning the boundaries of that relationship. So Katie might say that I baby him too much, but
No.
Yeah, which is true. Let's just be honest.
No, I love the way that you support Michael, though. Like, I love that you drove up and back to go spend his birthday with him, where he's at law school right now. And I love that you help him move apartments, and I'm happy that you take care of him in that way. Because
Okay, so
I think that he missed out. Because I think he missed out on that earlier, and for some very important years of life. And so it's I hope it's reassuring to him as well that you're there, and I think he knows that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I did. I missed out on a lot of those lacrosse games and things like that, where you guys, I was, soccer mom and volleyball mom to you and Dennis. So that's a very good point, Katie.
Yeah, there were times that,
Go ahead. I was just gonna ask so I feel like part of this kind of falls into this progression of that we do with our parents, right? We idolize them, and then we end up demonizing them, and then we end up humanizing them throughout our life, right? So when we're younger, we idolize our parents, right? We love them, we think they're the best thing, and then we start to find ways to demonize them. They're our enemy, right? And so part of this, it could have been very easy. Like for me, I haven't had a chance to humanize my biological mother, so she's still kind of, I know she's a human, I know she exists, like great, I hope she's well. That's kind of as humanized as she's going to get. But for you guys, how did you guys go from being able to, rehumanize your mother, like in that role, and rehumanize her, and then also, Janice, how did you rehumanize yourself with them?
Oh gosh, a lot of therapy for me question. And working through my issues. Yeah, and with my kids, it was a lot of trial and error, making mistakes. So yeah, I'd love to hear, Katie, if you want to share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, in your addiction was the realization, like you said, you idolize your parents as a kid, and in your addiction, there were many moments that you're like, oh, they're human. Like my mom's allowed to make mistakes. Like early in your sobriety, you're a human, you're allowed to make mistakes, you're learning, you're growing. But you want all of this to happen so quickly, and you kind of have to grieve the idol that you set up as a kid and thought your parents were as kids. And that grieving process, I think, healed me and made me a lot stronger. But I think it also contributed to a lot of the walls that I put up too, and how some of those walls made our relationship and your recovery difficult to overcome. So but
walls and boundaries serve a purpose. So Jay, as an objective third person, I can see now that Katie's walls served a purpose to protect her from getting hurt.
Absolutely.
All my kids' walls, the boundaries that I put up. So maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Also, from my now removed from it point of view, it helped teach me the lesson, that it's not enough. You got to keep working at it, So again, it goes back to, it takes time and patience and perseverance. So what are your thoughts about boundaries, Jay? Because you have boundaries with your mom that serve you, and I'm not going to judge that. I think that's the best thing for you.
Yeah. No, and so if I'm talking from the mental health clinician side of myself, then the purpose of boundaries is essentially to help yourself stay safe, to stay sane, and to stay, healthy, right? To create the healthiest version of yourself. You have to put boundaries in place with people that maybe you don't want to put boundaries in place with, but you have to put those walls up. You have to put those boundaries up, because without them, you're essentially, you can be enabling yourself, but you can also be enabling them. So without Katie putting up those walls and putting in place those boundaries towards you, Janice, then that's enabling you. That's enabling the addiction. That's enabling you to continue being how you're being. If she doesn't call you out on your behaviors, and she doesn't call you out on your BS, that she picked up on, things like that, then that never changes, right? That doesn't change for you. It doesn't change for her. It enables it, because she's not helping you get better. She's helping you stay exactly where you're at this baseline, right? She's not helping you grow and become who you really want to be. And versus, she's just keeping you down, right? But she's also keeping herself down. And so she's just allowing this crappy behavior to keep happening towards her, like no big deal, which can then play a part in her future relationship and plays a part in how she raises her children, and, continues with that generation, this generational cycle, right? Which we don't want, right? But since she did put those walls up, since she did put those boundaries in place, and she does call you out, I'm still sure if she needed to today and you were doing those things, she would call you out again. I'm sure over the past 11 years, she's called you out plenty, and whatnot. I'm sure all your children have, and that's okay, because you need that, right? Without that, they're enabling you to stay exactly where you're at. They're enabling you to not make changes. They're enabling you to just be still within that addiction in some way. And so it's important. For me personally, that boundary was set many, many, many years ago. And I'm more than okay with it, right? I have no problems. I have no regrets with it. Zero, zilch, not enough. I'm so happy with that boundary. I am so much better off not talking to her and not involving that toxicity in my life. Because I was able to reflect and learn, as I got older and whatnot. Man, there was a lot of broken promises. There was a lot of hurt that came with that. There was a lot of, birthday presents that never got delivered. There's a lot of birthday cards that never came. There's a lot of things that, were never delivered on. There's a lot of things that just never happened, right? And so it was better for me to just cut that off and not subject that to myself for the rest of my life. And then when I had children, not subject them to that too, because they don't need that, whatnot, right? It's better for them to not have that relationship at all than to have that relationship even a little bit. So I'd rather them not have it, not have to worry about it, not know who the heck she is, anything like that, than versus have them go through the cycle and talk to her, and me have to talk to her and deal with her bullshit, and never know when she's going to call, and she's going to be sober, she's going to be drunk, or she's going to be a little sober or whatnot, things like that. It was just better for me not to put that stress on me, and not to even open up my phone line, not even open up that communication, just put a lid on it, duct tape it, vacuum seal it, gorilla tape it, all the things, just shut that completely off. That's easier. That's easier for me. That was been what's best for me. And yes, if you're listening to this and may say, oh, well, you're a coward and you just need to get over it and blah, 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 shut your mouth. You're not living my life. Kind of thing. That's what I'll tell you straight up. And everyone handles the situation differently. Like me and my half brother who share the same mother, you know, he always says, well, you need to work past it. I'm like, no, I don't. I have worked past it. This is me working past it. This is me working through it. This is my conclusion. Exactly where I'm at is where I'm at today. And I have another family member who I recently, stopped talking to probably a couple months ago. An uncle of mine, just because I just couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand these different things he would say, things like that. So I just, cut him off. After all these years, I'm done talking to you. Like I'm just completely done. Not because of any addiction or anything like that. It's just because I'm just done talking to you. Like this doesn't serve me. You add more stress. You add more, drama, anger, things like that. And I'm not dealing with you, kind of thing. So I'm done. I'm walking away, stepping away from this, kind of thing. And that can be tough for family, but also it can also be necessary at some point too, where you have to put up those walls, you have to put in those boundaries, and say, look, no, we're not. And so like he lives over on the west side where my grandma lives and where my aunt lives and stuff. And I've told them both, my aunt, my family over there, my grandma, I'm like, I've made it very clear, like when I come over, he is not included in anything that we're going to. Like, I'm sorry. Like he can bitch and complain all he wants, but he's not included. He is not. I'm not seeing him. I'm not being around him. He cannot, be included in this. And if that's a problem, then look, I guess I'm not coming over then, kind of thing. But they get it. They understand, which is really nice. It's really nice to have my aunt, who is the older sister of that uncle and my biological mother. And she gets it. She gets it. She gets it 100%. So when I say those things, she doesn't even question it. She's just like, okay, no problem. My grandmother, same way. My grandma, bless her heart, when she was raising me, my biological mother would call, and I was probably really young. I was probably like 7, 8 years old. I was super young, maybe younger. But she would start asking me, do you want to talk to her? And if I said no, it was a no. She didn't push it. She didn't push that on me.
Love
And so I was just like, okay, we're not doing it. And then she would take, not the beating, but she would take the earful of, oh, he doesn't, very similar, addict kind of things. He doesn't love me. I'm such a screw up, blah, 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 blah. And my grandma would be like, well, that's on you. Like, he's not doing this because of me. I just asked him a question. He's doing this because of you and what you're doing right now. And so she made it very clear to her, and that's her daughter. That's my biological mother and stuff like that. Like, she wants that relationship to happen, but there's a reason that she raised me from 2 weeks old until I was a teenager and whatnot, and then went and lived with my dad and whatnot too. So, it's important. So
yeah,
that's kind of a long roundabout storytelled answer there. So
yeah,
No, but I think that's a great example
of protecting your mental health and prioritizing that
Katie.
first, for sure.
Yeah. Which comes up a lot because, many of us have people in our lives that we have to shut out, and it's okay, to put up that wall because you have to take care of yourself first. Like, and that's part of goes back to I have to take care of my sobriety first, which means not putting myself into situations as basic as going to a bar, but also situations as complicated as like maybe not attending this family reunion, So it's a process. Family healing is definitely a process.
100%.
Absolutely.
And family healing
Absolutely.
and, kind of breaking these cycles of generational trauma, go hand in hand, essentially, right? And so how have you guys worked toward, or Janice, how have you specifically worked toward breaking these cycles of generational traumas, these generational almost curses and whatnot with the addiction and whatnot? Because I mentioned at the top, for the listeners that were paying attention to the intro, like some of this came from your mother, and traveled down to you. So what have you done specifically in your sobriety and in your recovery to end it so it doesn't go on to Katie and her siblings?
That's a great question. It alcoholism and dysfunctional family habits go way back. So I think the first thing has been awareness, becoming aware of it. I mean, I in order to be comfortable with my children rejecting me, I had to understand where that came from, and love always being conditional, things like that. So had to understand it, explore it. Part of what Katie said, grieve. I had to understand my parents didn't have bad intent, that they did the best that they could do. I had to challenge those thoughts and those behaviors. And that can be as basic as my parents spanked me, I should spank my children, and then challenging, no, there's much better ways of disciplining your children. Or it could be as complicated as, my mom, my parents both guilt tripped me into behaviors, making changes, family loyalty, and observing that, changing that in myself, acknowledging that I did a lot of that to my kids. My older child definitely was spanked until we realized it didn't work. But I mean, so that I acknowledged that I made those mistakes with my kids, and then trying to break those habits and being accountable. Katie and Matthew in particular call me out my stuff quite well. It really helps me that they'll be like, it bothers me when you do this, or you're doing this again. I mean, it's so to break the pattern, starts with me. I understand where I came from. I look at it, let it go, and try to make changes for the future. And I see that. I mean, Katie and I talk about so I only have 2 grandchildren, but here's a simple example. I said something derogative about myself in front of my granddaughter, and my son goes, we don't talk about our bodies in front of Annie. Like, I must have said something like, oh, if I could only lose this weight. So the point being, I see in him that they're learning from their whole experience and making positive changes, because they don't want their child to grow up with body insecurities like I did. And I know I never intentionally passed those things down to my kids, but I can't help but think they didn't squeak out of me when they saw me getting on the bathroom scale, twice a day, that didn't influence them in some way.
Yeah.
So that's a real simple example, a real safe example of breaking that habit.
I think no matter what, though, there are certain things
and I'm
that
sure Katie will too.
Well, who knows? But we'll see. But I think that there are certain things that we're aware that, like, we definitely want to do differently. Am I breaking up? I think there are certain things that we're aware that we definitely want to do differently.
A little bit, but keep going.
Than our parents. But then there are certain underlying things that we're not aware of that we still continue to do and carry on. And maybe it takes moments like that, like Dennis pointing out, hey, we're not doing that in front of our kids. And so I think that we're all just learning. And yeah, there's certain things that we work to do differently and certain things that we still have been trained and raised in a certain way, thought processes that you've got to, one, be aware of in order to change, that you might not even be aware of.
And so, Katie, what are some things that specifically that you're doing? I don't know if you have children or if you kind of where you're at with life and all that, but is there anything specifically that you are doing some inner work on to break these cycles for yourself too, to keep them broken going forward?
Yes. So I do not have children. I have 2 beautiful dog babies who I love very, very much, and a fiance. But I think that therapy is great. I have done more work on myself to be more aware of my emotions at different points in time as well. So, like, I don't want to put all the responsibility on my mom to say, like, when you do this, it annoys me. There are certain times that I'm like, Katie, like, you're unreasonably getting annoyed at something silly, like, to calm myself down. And, but I think therapy is great, right? I struggle with anxiety. I have ADHD. Yeah. So just talking things out, like, I love to talk things out in general with people around me, and to express my thought processes and emotions, to, like, organize them and get through them. But speaking that out, and I've only recently started going back to therapy. I wasn't going to therapy for a few years there, but I have been in and out of therapy over the course of my lifetime. But speaking them out with someone who is
Since your mom
unbiased
started
and
drinking.
a professional who can validate my feelings and then who can also give advice moving forward about like better ways to communicate these thoughts or feelings, I think has been really, really helpful for me.
Yeah, I think Katie's doing a great job of her own personal growth. So as the active alcoholic in her home, I still feel a lot of guilt and responsibility for that. And I balance that. But here's an important lesson that I want every individual who worries about what maladaptive patterns they've taught their kids. As I go to my own therapy, do my own self-help skills, I'm teaching my children that you can experience a terrible problem and recover from it and come back. This is what I learned from my therapist. And trust me, she had to pound it into me because for many years I would get caught up in like, I was a bad parent. I wish I could have done things differently. And she would refocus me to the present and be like, but look at what you're doing now. The lessons you're teaching your kids now in recovery are significant because we're all going to experience different challenges in life. And I think resiliency is a great tool to have. And it's never too late to learn it. I mean, I'm still learning, growing, and changing in my 60s. So
yeah, I think that it's very natural, or it's something I struggle with, is to focus in on something negative and to like be very self-critical of something at work that I didn't handle in the way that I could have, and I could have improved in a little things here and there. But I think it's also important to think bigger picture and be reminded of the positive things you're doing well and like situations you're handling really well. And like you did do a good job in that conversation. Like it could have gone a million other ways, but like, yeah, you could have improved a little bit, but you did great.
Yeah. And one thing I keep hearing from both of you, like a lot, is a lot of that self-accountability, you know, for both your parts in it. You know, there's not a lot of blame, right? There's a lot of accountability. There's a lot of responsibility being taken on both your parts. And a lot of that, you know, like forgiveness for self, that's really important in this whole process as well, right? So there's a lot of that I hear from both of you, like throughout, you know, our recording today. Like there's a lot of I. You know, it's very easy for especially a lot of us children on this side of it. You know, related with Katie here, like I could easily go and blame my biological mother for all my problems, right? But I also am my own person and I have to take responsibility for myself. I am in control of myself. I'm in control of my reactions. I'm in control of my thoughts. I'm in control of my emotions. I'm in control of, you know, all these different things. So I have to take that upon myself. I can't blame her for it. Yes, she may have contributed to that for me, but I can't totally blame it. And, you know, that's the problem with that I see a lot is a lot of people want to, you know, just blame. They don't want to take that accountability and that responsibility on themselves. They want to just, you know, point the finger elsewhere because that's way easier than having to do that work and take responsibility and handle those feelings. But so I really love that. I just keep hearing that from you guys. So it makes my, you know, the inner mental health clinician of myself is very happy to hear, you know, two people that are just taking that responsibility on themselves, not blaming, but really working. I know that that's taken a lot of time, probably for both of you to be able to do. So I just want to recognize that something very important here. Just a couple more things I wanted to hit on just super quick. How important has it been for Janice for you to include family members in your recovery process? And what benefits have you seen come from including family members in your recovery?
Well, I think the education is crucial. I have to now I'm going to be self-conscious about saying I have to take full responsibility for my sobriety. The kids, no matter what, this sounds terrible, but I'm just going to spit it out. Whatever they put me through, whatever challenges, it still falls back on me. So okay, I think I've lost track of the question, but family is crucial. Educating my family, being supportive to them, letting them have their process. Oh my gosh, I would have loved for each of them to get involved with like a group therapy with me early on, but that that didn't happen for a number of reasons. So part of that is just the process, being patient with the process. And what was the second part of the question?
I think that was it.
Okay.
That was it.
Katie, do
So
you want
Katie,
to contribute?
how important has it been for you to be involved in like your mom's recovery and helping her, like you, your siblings, your family, being involved with her?
I don't think that we were very involved at the beginning, honestly. I think that Matthew made the impact letter. I set some really strong boundaries. Like you said earlier, boundaries are really important. They're really crucial. They're great for learning, teaching someone what you expect moving forward, but also self-protection as well, like you hit on earlier. Early in sobriety, I think that we were not patting you on the back saying like, good job, way to go. So back then, I don't know how we exactly contributed other than the boundaries. Now I'm just so supportive and proud of everything and the work that you've put into up to this point.
We lost Katie.
I love to see it
I will
come
say
to fruition,
that,
and
again,
the book is something that's
their
really
process
exciting.
is their process.
You know what I mean? We're all really supportive of.
And that setting that boundary helped me to get through the denial that I had damaged them. I mean, I went into treatment thinking what I did was not that bad. You know, I didn't physically abuse my kids, but it's not to say that the emotional abuse wasn't just as bad, or the neglect, the emotional neglect. So,
yeah, no, very important to recognize that. And then just hopefully she'll be back here in just a moment. But is there any insights from your book that you want to share? Any key insights or takeaways from the book that you believe will be most helpful to those who pick it up and read it?
Yeah, so my overriding message is hope, not to give up hope, be patient, be accountable. The book does have a little bit of a tough love approach because that's who I am. That's my AA background. But it also has because I'm also a therapist and a social worker who's worked in this field, it also has some realistic answers and tools and approaches. And I think I devote a whole chapter to the brain science and the reason for that, and a very easy to understand read. And the point of that chapter is to help people understand just how fragile early sobriety is, how difficult it is to prevent relapse during that first year. And part of that is just because of the brain science. So, yeah, I include that. The book, this is a cliche too, but it's so true. I wrote the book that I wish had been available to me when I left treatment. A little tough love, a lot of information, a little science-based information, you know, but a lot of direction, but giving hope.
Yeah, I think that's important. You know, sometimes you need to write what you wish you had, so then it has that impact on those that are on the other side of that book that need that book to where they're at. So super important.
I will say this. The book is available for pre-sale on Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Fancy. And I think that's also available on your site as well, correct?
Yes, yeah.
You can also get it right there on your site as well, which we'll link in the show notes. I want to ask just some fun questions now to kind of bring us back down from that conversation, because that was covered a lot of great things there in that conversation today. So I really appreciate you guys both being open, your insight and whatnot, and that was a really great conversation for all the things we talked about. You know, fear, recovery, generational traumas, you know, healing, you know, rebuilding relationships. I think that's a lot of just amazing stuff there. Is there any? So one of the first fun question here. Do you guys have any memories with each other that just bring a smile to your faces? Any just like really fun, lighthearted memories that just bring a smile to your guys' face when you guys think of it?
First thing that comes to mind for me was taking those funny pictures on the Baltic Sea cruise that we went on. After college, I
about 3
waited
years into
tables.
recovery.
Yeah. After college, I waited tables in Ireland. And while I was there, my mom flew over and I met her in Stockholm. Is that where we left from? And we did this like Baltic Sea cruise. And you know, like on the photo setups, there was one with like fish background and we were like swimming like we were fishies. It just, yeah, that's fun.
Yeah.
Do you have any, Mom?
We've made a lot of great memories in sobriety. So the first thing that came to my mind, though, was Katie's little red cast. When she was a girl, she broke her leg at around 2 years old. And she loved that red cast and was very disappointed when it was time to recast it and the doctor put yellow on top of it. I was like, no. But yeah, I have lovely memories of Katie, and I'm glad that we keep making new memories. I mean, that's a testimony to anyone listening who feels like their relationship will never get better.
Yeah, I think our relationship is stronger than it's ever been right now. And I'm really grateful for that. I'm really grateful for your sobriety. I'm really grateful for all the work you've done. I'm really grateful for where I'm at. And I just love where we're at together right now.
Yeah, thank you. Do you guys have what is your guys' like go-to self-care activity that helps you relax and recharge?
You go first, Katie.
I like to go get my nails done, as cliche as that sounds. But recently, after while I was down by the beach, I went and I walked on the beach for 30 minutes, and that was really nice and relaxing.
Yeah. Well, my most important self-care skill is to get enough sleep. And I don't wake up with an alarm almost any day of the week. And I know that's a simple thing, but sleep is just crucial to me. And then in terms of other more realistic self-care, it's probably to continue. I'm not in intensive individual therapy, but I do group therapy with women who grew up in dysfunctional families every other week. And it's a fabulous resource.
That was a great answer.
So last final question here for you guys. Janice, Janice, I'll phrase this for you, and then Katie, I'll phrase it for you too. So Katie, I'll phrase it for you first. If you could offer advice to someone else around that same age that you were going through and trying to support a loved one going through addiction, that maybe is about 18, 22 years old, kind of the same age range you were, what kind of advice would you offer them? One or two pieces of advice you would offer them with their trying to support, their parent?
Yes. That's a really great question. I would just want to tell them that it's going to be okay. Like, you're going to be okay. You're going to get through it. No matter what happens, no matter the outcome, you're going to be okay. Talk to people, look out for people for support.
Love that. That's perfect. And then Janice, for you here, what advice would you offer a young dad whose age is maybe 18, 22, or a young parent in general who's just starting out his fatherhood journey, but if he may also be dealing with addiction? What kind of advice would you offer him if he's kind of in this place where he's just starting out his fatherhood journey and maybe also dealing with addiction of some kind?
Well, absolutely ask for help. Don't try to do it alone. There's lots of good support systems out there that are free, self-help to very structured. That was another mistake I made, was trying to do it on my own, being afraid to ask for help. I think asking for help is a great, simple answer.
Janice, Katie, thank you guys so much for joining me today. Thank you guys so much for sharing your experiences with me, with our audience, with the listeners, your wisdom as well. Your insights are incredibly valuable. The different perspectives of a child and a mom who went through it together and have come out on the other side of it shows just a lot of hope, a lot of resiliency, and a lot of just really that hope that it can happen, and that it can happen for you too, if of course circumstances permit it. Of course, every circumstance, every situation is different, but you guys are a great example of that. For those interested in pre-ordering Janice's book that I mentioned a couple times here during the recording, Rebuilding Relationships in Recovery, you can pre-order it, I believe, through Barnes and Noble, and can you also pre-order through Amazon as well, correct?
Mm-hmm, correct.
That's perfect. And you can pre-order that in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook format. I'll include the links in our show notes as well. And a big thank you to all of our listeners for joining us today on the Young Dad Podcast. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. There are resources and people ready to support you. And until next time, take care, stay strong, and keep moving forward.